13 years ago, my daughter left my 3 grandchildren on my doorstep, saying she just needed to take a nap. She never came back. I raised them, fed them, and held them close when she treated them like trash. But this morning, she didn't return with a thank you card or an apology. She came back with a heavily armed Coast Guard team, a lawyer in a $3,000 suit, and an accusation that I had kidnapped her children. They thought they had me cornered. They thought I was some senile old man they could crush without effort, but they didn't know a thing about the sea-stained blue envelope that had been hidden for years beneath a loose floorboard in my bedroom. When I slapped that yellowed paper onto the judge's bench, his expression wasn't one of anger, it was pure, no shock. He looked at me and whispered, almost voiceless, "Do the children know this?" I held his gaze and replied, "Not yet, but they're about to." It was 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and the only thing I was guilty of was using too much paprika in the fish bake. My name is Josiah Joe Green, but everyone calls me Joe. I'm 70 years old, and my knees crack like dry driftwood when the weather changes, but my hands are still steady. I spent 40 years as a commercial deep-sea diver and salvage expert, the kind of work that teaches you 2 things: patience and how to fix a breakfast that'll stick to your ribs. The kitchen was silent except for the sizzle of cod grease and the low hum of the dehumidifier. This was my favorite time of day. In the next room, my 3 reasons for breathing were sound asleep. Sam was already 17, a big kid, the stroke for the high school rowing team, and he had an appetite that never seemed to end. Leah was 15, sharp-tongued and clear-headed. She talked about going to maritime law school as if it were already decided. And Michael, my Michael, was 13. He was barely a 2-month-old infant wrapped in a dirty blanket when his mother dropped him off here. I was scrambling eggs the way Michael loved them, runny and not overdone. While I cooked, I ran the numbers in my head. My pension was $400 a month. Between the mortgage, utilities, and groceries for 3 teenagers growing at a cruel pace, I usually had about $100 left over. I'd been saving those hundreds in an old tackle box for 6 months to buy Sam a new racing oar for the regional meet. It wasn't a life of luxury. There were no Caribbean cruises or fancy boats, but this house was warm and full of love, or at least it was until the front door exploded. I didn't even hear a knock. 1 second, I was reaching for the pepper shaker, and the next, a deafening boom shook my bones, knocking framed photos off the hallway walls and showering the living room with splinters like shrapnel. Before I could even turn off the stove, my kitchen filled with men in helmets, vests, and long rifles. They shouted orders that bounced off the linoleum floor. "Federal agents, get down, hands where I can see them." Being old doesn't mean being slow. My first instinct was to run to the hall, to protect the bedrooms, to protect my kids. I took 1 step when a heavy boot swept my legs out from under me. I fell hard. My face slammed against the cold tile next to a spot of cod grease. A searing pain shot through my bad knee, but I ignored it. "Don't hurt them," I yelled from the floor, my voice ragged. "There are children in the house. Please don't touch them." A knee dug into my back, and handcuffs snapped shut over my wrists with a click that still echoes when I remember it. My heart beat against my ribs like a trapped bird. I heard them wake up. I heard Leah scream. I heard Michael crying. "Let him go," Sam roared. I craned my neck trying to see. My boy had burst out of his room in a t-shirt and boxers, ready to fight an army for his grandfather. "Stay back, Sam," I screamed. "Don't move, son. Stay back." 2 agents grabbed him and slammed him against the wall. "He's just a kid," I pleaded. "He's 17, please." That's when the sea of uniforms parted, as if clearing a path for someone important, and she walked in. 13 years had passed, but I'd recognize her walk anywhere. Clara, my daughter. Only this wasn't the Clara I remembered. The last time I saw her, she was skinny, her skin gray from cheap drugs and liquor, with a bruise on her cheek from whatever guy she was self-destructing with that week. She had left 3 crying babies in my living room, said she was going for a lighter, and vanished. The woman who now crossed my kitchen looked like she stepped out of a magazine. Cream-colored silk dress, perfectly styled hair, expensive dark sunglasses. She took them off slowly to reveal eyes expertly made up with cruel precision. She looked healthy, she looked rich, and she looked at me with a blood-chilling look of pure disgust. "There he is," she shrieked, pointing at me with a finger tipped by impeccable nails. "There's the monster, officer. That's the man who stole my babies." I was still on the floor, my cheek against the tile, unable to believe it. Stole them. Didn't steal them. I picked them up from where she threw them down. Clara stepped over my legs as if I were garbage, and rushed toward the hallway where the children stood huddled together. "Oh, my darlings," she wailed with the theatrics of a cheap reality show. "Mommy is here. Mommy finally found you. I've been looking for you for so long." I saw Michael shrink away. He didn't know who this woman was. He was an infant when she left. To him, she was a stranger with expensive perfume and chaos on her skin. But Clara didn't care. She squeezed Michael and Leah in a suffocating embrace. "Get away from them," I roared. The knee in my back pressed harder, driving the air from my lungs. "You don't have the right, Clara. You abandoned them. You left them in dirty diapers. You were gone for 2 days." She turned to me, and for an instant the mask dropped. She gave me a smile of pure, icy triumph, a smile that said, "I already won." Then she turned back to the agent next to her, and perfect tears instantly sprang to her eyes. "He's delusional, officer," she sobbed. "He's violent. He held us prisoner for 13 years. He told me he'd kill them if I ever came back. I've lived in fear every single day. Lies, it was all a lie. But to them, I was a disheveled old man in a wrecked kitchen, and she was an elegant, devastated mother." "Josiah Green," the officer said, yanking me to my feet. "You are under arrest for 3 counts of kidnapping, interference with custody, and endangering a minor. You have the right to remain silent, ... They dragged me outside. My neighbors, in their pajamas and robes, watched from their lawns as if, well, it were a spectacle. Mrs. Petrie, with whom I had shared fresh catches from my fishing boat for years, covered her mouth in horror. I wanted to scream that I was innocent, but the shame choked me as they pushed me into the back seat of the patrol car. I looked at the house. The door was hanging off its hinges, and on the porch I received the final stab. Clara had her arms around the children. Sam looked like he was about to vomit. Leah was crying silently. Michael was lost, and in front of them stood a photographer, camera in hand. Clara was posing, tilting her head to catch the morning light, holding them not to comfort them, but to frame the shot. "Hold it right there, Mrs. Sterling," the photographer said. "This is the cover of the year, the reunion of the century." Flashes blinded me through the glass. My grandchildren were props in her sick play. When the patrol car pulled away, something inside me stopped weeping and turned cold. For 13 years, I protected them from wolves. I worked double shifts. I learned how to braid Leah's hair. I memorized rowing rules for Sam. I stayed up all night through Michael's fevers. I gave up my quiet retirement, my savings, my peace to fix what she broke. And in 20 minutes, Clara had returned from nowhere to burn it all down. In the rear view mirror, the cop looked at me. Anything to say, Grandpa? I leaned my head back and closed my eyes. Not yet, I whispered. Not yet. But the war had just begun, and I was going to turn her kingdom to ashes. The cell block smelled of chlorine, sweat, stale food, and despair. I sat on a steel bench, bolted to the floor, my joints aching from the dampness. Around me were hard-faced men, scarred knuckles, and tattoos that spoke of bad decisions. And then there was me, Joe Green, 70 years old, in orange sandals 2 sizes too big, wondering if my kids had eaten breakfast. A guard struck the bars with his baton. Green, legal matter. They took me to an interview room. At a scratched table sat a kid who didn't look like he had started shaving, yet cheap suit, sweaty shirt. Mr. Green, he said, his voice cracking. I'm David Wells, your public defender. He wouldn't look me in the eye, shuffling papers, dropping his pen, picking it up. Look, David, I said. I don't need theater. Just tell me when I'm getting back to my grandkids. The judge initially denied bail, but we managed to set it at $500,000. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Son, my pension pays for electricity and food. I have $100 saved for a racing, or you just told me $500,000. David pulled out a tablet. It's not just the bail, it's the narrative. You have to see this. And there it was, on the news feed. Coastal nightmare. Grandfather kidnaps 3 minors. Clara was at a podium. Microphones like hungry snakes beside her. A man carved from expensive marble, Marcus Thorne, one of those lawyers who ruins lives, with a magazine smile. My father is a dangerous fanatic, Clara cried to the cameras. It was the best performance of her life. She claimed that 13 years ago she came home, and I was waiting for her with a flare gun and forced her to run. That I locked the children in a dark bilge. I squeezed my fists under the table. The only weapon I ever had was an old harpoon to spear flounder. And the dungeon was a spare room with stick-on dolphins that I put up myself so Michael wouldn't be afraid of the night. Thorne took the floor, indignant, vowing they wouldn't rest until I was in prison, that they would sue for full custody and damages for emotional torture. I shoved the tablet so hard it nearly fell. Lies, I growled. It's all lies, David. He swallowed, skeptical. He had seen a woman cry in high definition. Public opinion has already convicted you. If you have proof, witnesses. I closed my eyes, and the memory of that day hit me with the dust of desperation. I didn't have a flare gun. I had my wallet. Clara arrived, trembling, her skin gray from pills. She owed money, a lot of money, to people who send reminders. They're going to kill me, Dad. They'll hurt the kids. I didn't have $5,000 in the bank, so I walked to my old fishing boat, a skiff I'd rebuilt with my own hands. I sold it that afternoon for cash. I walked back under the sun and handed her the wad of bills. Take it, pay them, clean yourself up, be a mother. She snatched the money without a word of thanks, without looking at the babies. She just ran. And now she was telling the world I'd chased her with a gun. Mr. Green, David said, as if from far away, we need a statement. Maybe we should plead diminished capacity due to age. I stood up. The chair scraped. I am not senile, and I will not plead guilty to anything. I saved her. I sold my boat to save her life, and she sold me out for a headline. They put me in a common cell with 20 or 30 men, and a plastic-protected television screen showed yellow tape on my house, the door destroyed, and then my mugshot. I looked wild, hair disheveled, eyes wide with shock. A huge man with a tattooed neck watched me, then looked at the TV. The murmuring died down, and he stood up. That you, the kidnapper, he grunted. I backed up until I hit the wall. I held up my hands, palms open. It's not what they say, it's a lie. He didn't listen. In jail, there are hierarchies, and those who harm children are below the dirt. You locked them up, he spat. You stole them from their mama. He moved closer. Others formed a circle, blocking the guard's view. I saw the rage in his eyes, the same rage I felt toward Clara, only directed at me. I braced myself. I was 70, bad knees, bad shoulder. I wouldn't win. His fist came like a freight train and cracked my jaw. A white light burst in my head. I tasted metal. My skull hit the concrete with a sound like a breaking branch. I went down. And the last thing I saw was the news banner. Mother reunites with children. Miracle in the South. Then everything went dark. I woke up in the infirmary with a drilling pain at the base of my skull. The doctor gave me 2 ibuprofen tablets and a paper that said I was fit for duty. David was waiting outside, more nervous than before. He had secured a bondsman, but the price was everything. My house, the land my father bought half a century ago. If I missed a hearing or violated a condition, they would take the roof over my head. I signed with a trembling hand. The house was wood and brick. Without my grandkids, it was just trapped air. The taxi ride back was a slow humiliation. The driver kept looking at me in the mirror, the kidnapper grandpa. When he dropped me off, he didn't even want the money. He spat out the window and drove off. I stood on the sidewalk, looking at the wreckage of my life. Police tape danced in the wind like streamers. The oak front door, which I had restored 3 times, was split, the lock hanging. I crossed the tape and pushed the door open. The silence hit me first. For 13 years, this house had been music. Sea shanties, boat horns, Leah practicing her violin. It sounded like a dying seagull at first. Michael's laughter at his own jokes. Now, just the hum of the dehumidifier and my breathing. The police had ransacked everything. Cushions ripped open, drawers overturned, and fishing lures scattered on the floor. But they hadn't done the real damage. The hallway was full of empty, crooked frames. The photos were gone. Clara took them or destroyed them. She wanted to erase 13 years, to pretend I was never their father. I walked into the kids' room. Mattresses flipped, clothes scattered. I sat on Michael's bed, and my boot struck something hard. I reached under the bed and pulled out an old, yellowed pacifier with a little whale on it. Michael hid it when we told him he was too old. I held it, and suddenly I wasn't in a broken house anymore, but back at my front door 13 years ago, a humid night that smelled of rain and cheap perfume. Clara stood next to a rusty car, the engine trembling, black smoke rising. A man with neck tattoos waited behind the wheel, drumming his fingers impatiently on the steering wheel. Clara, bone-thin, smoked, and held a duffel bag. I begged her, in my work boots, "Don't go. You have a baby who needs milk. You have a little girl and a little boy. They need you." She exhaled chemical, bitter smoke in my face. "I'm sick of it, Dad. The crying, the diapers, this town. I want to live. I want to be free." She took a key ring, threw it at me. It hit my chest and tumbled to the dust. "There you go. Have the keys if you want them so badly. Keep them. They're just little barnacles. Just a hassle anyway." That's what she called her own children. Little barnacles. A hassle. I picked up the keys. When I looked up, she was getting into the car. "If you walk away now, don't come back," I yelled. She laughed, high-pitched and wild. "Don't worry, old man. You won't see me again." The car squealed away, and I watched her lights disappear. Then I heard the crying inside. It was Michael, hungry. I picked him up and promised a baby who couldn't even focus his eyes that he would never be a hassle. He would be the center of the world. The memory dissolved, and I returned to the present with the pacifier in my hand. She claimed I chased her off, but the truth was she threw them out like garbage because they were holding her back from being free. And now, because they came with a trust fund, she suddenly remembered she was a mother. A knock on the doorframe broke my trance. I slipped the pacifier into my pocket. It was Officer Martinez, a local cop I sometimes ran into at the docks. He wouldn't look me in the eye as he handed me papers. "I'm sorry, Joe. I really am, but I have to serve you." It was a temporary restraining order, 500 yards away from Sam, Leah, and Michael. No contact, direct or indirect. I had to surrender any weapons. "She's at the Harborview Suites," he mumbled. "She's got private security. Don't go near her. If you violate this, your bail is revoked, and you'll rot inside." When he left, the house became a tomb. I went to the kitchen. I should eat, even though my stomach twisted. Scrambled eggs were cold. I threw them into the sink. I started cleaning because it was the only thing I could control. I swept up the lures, gathered the glass, scrubbed the footprints. At 9 o'clock that night, I was still sitting, staring at the wall, wondering if Leah had her motion sickness patches. Her nausea always flared up when she was stressed. Clara didn't even know that, and she certainly didn't know where we kept the medicine then. The landline on the wall rang, the one no one uses anymore. It startled me. It rang again, shrill and urgent. I picked up the receiver, ready to rip the cord out if it was a reporter. Low, static, heavy breathing, and a trembling whisper. "Grandpa." My heart stopped. It was Sam. "Are you okay?" "Where are you?" I said, gripping the phone. "In the bathroom." "I stole an employee's cell," he whispered. "Grandpa, you have to help us. She's crazy, completely crazy." My legs were shaking, but I forced a calm. "Slow down, son. What's wrong?" She locked us in a suite. She took our phones. She took Leah's patches because they looked bad in photos. She brought in a team of stylists. She's making us wear scratchy clothes and pose for social media. She pinches Michael when he doesn't smile. Rage blurred my vision. "Sam, listen to me. You have to be strong. Protect your brother and sister," he sobbed. "There are men outside, guards. They won't let us leave. She keeps saying you're going to stay in prison forever, that we belong to her now. She talks about money all the time, about lawyers, about a trust fund. She doesn't want us. She wants the check." I felt it in my gut. It wasn't love. It was greed. "I'm not going to prison," I said firmly. "I'm going to bring you back. I promise you. But you do exactly what I tell you. Head down. Don't fight the guards, but watch everything. Memorize what she says. Can you do that?" "I think so, but hurry," he whimpered. "She says she's taking us far away." She talked about the Bahamas, about a boarding school, Bahamas. She was going to ship them off like packages. "Grandpa, I have to go. She's coming." I heard a doorknob, more turn, and her sharp voice in the background. "Who are you talking to?" The line went dead. I stood in the dark kitchen, holding the receiver like a useless piece of plastic. The law said 500 yards. The law said she's their mother. But the law hadn't heard the fear in my boy's voice. I hung up and went to my room. I pulled out an old duffel bag. I wasn't going to wait for a court hearing while she tortured them. I needed help. A man I hadn't spoken to in 20 years. Someone who owed me a favor from the days we worked salvage diving and were young and dumb. Silas, everyone called him Sil. He used to be a private investigator until the alcohol got the better of him. If anyone could track down where Clara's money was coming from, It was him. I grabbed my keys. The silence was no longer oppression. It was a countdown. Not yet. That same night, I learned it was worse. Sam had managed to tell me more before the line was cut. Clara had turned the suite into a prison and a stage. She made Leah wear a tight dress to record videos under a ring light, forcing them to smile and repeat how much they missed Mommy. When the camera was off, she locked them up and went to the bar. But what chilled my blood was Michael. He has a severe shellfish allergy, so severe that even the vapor from cooking can close his throat in 2 minutes. We kept EpiPens in the kitchen, his backpack, and the glove compartment. Clara didn't know that. She left before he ever ate solids. Sam told me she ordered room service and tossed a plate of crab cakes onto the bed, saying Michael should eat them because it would look cute. Michael refused, terrified, and she held his face to try and force them in. Sam had to shove her away to save his brother's life. She then took his EpiPen, saying he was being dramatic. My grandson was without his medicine, locked up with a woman capable of killing him through ignorance and vanity. I drove toward the precinct. I drove fast, without looking at the speedometer. I spent half a lifetime on the dry docks. When something blows up, you don't fill out forms, you act or people die. But as I walked under the fluorescent lights, I understood that my world meant nothing here. I went to the counter. The desk sergeant was Peterson. I had fixed his bilge pump once for free. He saw me, and his face hardened. I want to file a report, I said. My grandchildren are in immediate danger. He leaned back, arms crossed. Danger from whom, Mr. Green? From their mother, I spat. She tried to force a boy with a deadly allergy to eat shellfish. She took his medication. Send a check to the Harborview Suites right now. Peterson let out a dry laugh. Let me get this straight. The man accused of kidnapping 3 minors wants to report the victim for giving her son a crab cake. Do you know how crazy that sounds? It's not crazy, it's the truth. I slammed my hand on the counter. She doesn't know them. She's hurting them. He stood up, heavy-set, his voice a threat. You're lucky to be free. You're the suspect here. She's the mother. If she wants to give him a crab cake, she gives him a crab cake. You don't dictate how. She raises the children you stole. Stole again. As if I were a thief in the night, and not the only one who cared if they lived. She almost killed him, I whispered, breaking. Go home, he said, pointing at the door. Or I'll revoke your bail, or harassment. I left, feeling smaller than ever. At the docks, I gave orders, and men moved, because they knew I looked out for them. Here, I was just an old criminal. The law was a wall, and I was cracking my head against it. I walked toward my truck, parked on a dark corner. The night air was thick. I felt powerless, and I hated that feeling more than the pain. I touched the handle, and a voice stopped me. Mr. Green, a silver Jaguar, purred 2 spaces down. Leaning against the hood was Marcus Thorne in person. He looked even more like a shark. My fists clenched. What do you want? He exhaled smoke into the sky and walked over with calculated boredom. I've come to offer you a parachute, Joe. You can call me Mr. Green, I replied, and I don't want anything from you. He chuckled. He held it out. There's a cashier's check in here for $50,000. I froze. It was more than I'd managed to save in years. What? A settlement, he said softly. Clara is feeling generous. She acknowledges that you took care of them for a while. Just sign one document. What document? A voluntary relinquishment of all custodial rights. You admit you're old, overwhelmed. You retire, take the money, go to a quiet retirement community on the coast, and never contact Clara or the children again. Rage flared up in me like fire. You want me to sell them? Thorn shrugged. I want you to be realistic. You're 70, you're broke, and you're facing serious charges. I will destroy you in court. I'll paint you as an abusive, hoarding old man. You die in prison, or you take the money and go fishing. Everyone wins. I took the envelope. He smiled, triumphant. Then I slowly tore it once, then again until it was confetti. I threw it at his polished shoes. Tell my daughter I'm not for sale, I said, invading his space. And tell her that if anything happens to Michael because of her stupidity, I won't need a lawyer. I'll come for her myself. His smile twisted into a venomous sneer. You're making a mistake, old man. I gave you a chance. Now I'm going to bury you. He got into the Jaguar and drove off, leaving smoke behind. My hands were shaking from adrenaline, not fear. They thought they could buy me. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I didn't have money or the law on my side, but I had something they didn't, the truth. And I had Syl, who could find a needle in a haystack if the needle was made of gold. I started the engine. I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to find out where the money came from that allowed Clara to pay Thorn, and why she needed my grandchildren so urgently that she tried to bribe me into silence. I drove to an old trailer behind a salvage yard on the outskirts of town. A yellow bulb buzzed over the door. That's where Syl lived. We had been on the dry docks together when we still thought we were invincible. I banged hard. Open up. It's Joe. There was a crash inside. He opened the door in a stained t-shirt and jeans, a loose revolver in one hand, and a bottle of liquor in the other. Gray beard, red eyes. Damn, Joe, you look like you got hit by a bus. I feel like it. Can I come in? I entered. The smell of old paper, gun oil, and cheap alcohol. The trailer was a chaos of files and empty bottles, but in one corner, there was a desk with monitors glowing his altar. I sat on a box and told him everything. The raid, the arrest, the shellfish, the bribe. He listened without blinking. When I finished, he placed the revolver on the table. So she's back, he muttered, his voice gravelly, and swimming in cash. Thorn doesn't get out of bed for less than 10,000 up front. She's got a suite, I said. Syl cracked his knuckles. Let's find out, he typed rapidly. For a drunk, he had a surgeon's hands. First, he tracked down her old boyfriend, some guy named Tristan. 5 minutes later, he spoke, with dead end. Tristan died of an overdose 2 months ago, in a motel. Had $5 and a warrant for his arrest. Nope. He kept digging. No employment for 10 years. And nothing in her name until 3 weeks ago. And suddenly, platinum cards, accounts opened in tax havens, a shell company called Ocean View Holdings. Where did the initial money come from? I asked. It's big transfer. It came from a law office in Miami, Fenton Mayer and Cruz, the kind of probate lawyers who handle trusts for old money families. My pulse quickened. Clara didn't know anyone like that, unless ... Unless it's from the father, I whispered. Syl swiveled his chair. The father of the youngest boy. You told me, she said, he was a street vendor. No, I nodded. She said his name was Julian, and that he died before Michael was born. Who is he, Syl? He was silent for a long time. Only the buzz of the computers and the moths against the glass. Then he whistled. Vod. Julian Stone wasn't some nobody. He was the secret, illegitimate son of Robert Sterling. The name hit me like a fist. Robert Sterling, owner of Sterling Shipyards, one of the richest men in the country. I saw his obituary last month. Sterling kept Julian away with money, Syl explained, reading the screen. Julian. He died in a boating accident 4 months ago. No will. So the inheritance goes to his direct heirs. Syl nodded. And since he had no wife, and his parents are deceased, it goes to his children, Sam, Leah, and Michael. He opened a legal file. Julian's trust, valued at $18.5 million. I felt dizzy. My kids in hand-me-down clothes and generic cereal were multi-millionaires. And here's the worst part, Syl said, tapping the screen. The money is in trust until they turn 21. But the legal guardian collects an administration fee of $500,000 a year, plus housing and access to assets for the minor's benefit. I tasted bile. It wasn't love. It wasn't redemption. It was a salary. She needs custody to unlock the vault, I said, trembling with rage. Syl handed me a printout. Not just custody. She needs to be the sole guardian. That's why she accused you of kidnapping. If you become a felon, you can't fight for guardianship. She keeps the kids, collects the check, 13 years without a call, without a birthday card, and as soon as the money appeared, she kicked down my door. Syl pointed to another clause, residence in the Sterling family mansion in Palm Beach, Florida, until the youngest turns 18, and a fact that hit me hard. The hearing to name the permanent guardian and release the funds was next Tuesday, 6 days away. I understood the entire plan. If she arrived normally, a judge would see abandonment and my 13 years of raising them. I could win guardianship, or at least share it, and that would mean controlling the trust to protect the children. But a kidnapper doesn't get custody. A criminal doesn't manage $18 million. She had to destroy me. That's why the Coast Guard team, the flare gun story, the dark bilge. She needed me to be the monster so she could be the savior. If I was in prison by Tuesday, she would walk in alone, unopposed, and take the keys to the money. I wanted to warn them. I pulled out a burner phone and dialed the number Sam had used. I prayed he still had it hidden. It rang once, and a robotic voice answered. The number was disconnected. Same thing. She had found it. My boy was locked up with guards, and a mother who saw him as a walking banknote. And I couldn't even tell him, I'm coming for you. Syl turned up the volume on the news. Clara appeared in front of the hotel, dressed in black and pearls, like a suffering saint. Thorne was behind her, the elegant vulture. The reporter asked about her plans. Clara looked at the camera, fake tears, needing time to heal privacy. That's why they were leaving that very night for the Bahamas, to a specialized center in Freeport for kidnapping victims. Our flight leaves in 2 hours. We're heading to the private airfield, she said. I lost my breath. If she put them on a plane and got them out of the country, it was over. International custody battles take years. She'd put them in a cheap boarding school, collect her $500,000, and I'd never see them again. She's running, I said, understanding. She was afraid I'd manage to fight back before Tuesday. This wasn't a legal battle anymore. It was a rescue. If we go, I violate the order. If I get caught, I get 20 years. Syl checked the revolver cylinder and tucked it into his waistband. And we better not get caught. I thought of Sam's terrified voice, Leah's nausea, Michael's life sold for a mansion. Let's go, I said. Syl drove like the devil was chasing him down dark back roads. The engine roared, the chassis rattled, and the speedometer climbed until it seemed about to break. Wind rushed in through the windows, smelling of rain and burning rubber. I gripped the dashboard with one hand, and with the other, a small crowbar I had pulled from under the seat. 10 minutes, Joe, Lil Syl yelled. If the pilot gets clearance, they'll take off before we can get in. The private airfield appeared a glass building, a high fence topped with razor wire. On the tarmac, amber lights glowed, and there, like a white monster, a jet was ready, engines screaming. a black SUV next to the stairs. I saw them under the floodlights, as if it were an infernal stage. Clara was pulling Michael by the arm. My boy dug his heels in. She yanked him without mercy. A big man was carrying Leah over his shoulder while she kicked and struggled. And Sam, my Sam, wasn't crying with fighting. He planted himself in front of a guard, throwing punches with everything he had. The guy laughed and shoved him. Sam fell, got up immediately, and placed himself between the plane and his brother. "They're forcing them," I screamed. "Ram the gate." He didn't hesitate. He floored the gas and smashed through the gate. Metal shrieked, sparks flew, and we skidded onto the tarmac. The pilot must have seen us because the engines revved desperately. "Block the plane," I shouted. Sil crossed the car and skidded sideways in front of the jet's nose. We were feet from the stairs. ... I opened the door before the car settled and jumped out. My knees protested. I raised the crowbar, heavy and cold. "Let them go." I roared over the howl of the engines. Sam looked at me, his eyes wide with disbelief and hope. "Grandpa." Lara turned. The wind whipped her hair. She didn't look scared. She looked furious. "Get them on the plane now," she shrieked at the guards. The men hesitated, looking at an old man with metal in his hand and a crazed driver with a revolver tucked into his waistband. I advanced. I had arthritis, and my heart skipped sometimes, but I felt like a giant there. "If you touch them again, I'll break every bone in your bodies," I growled. The biggest guard reached inside his coat. Sil fired a shot into the air. The blast cut through the night. "F*** off," he yelled. "The next one isn't a warning shot." The guards from the plane backed off. Clara grabbed Michael by the shirt and tried to haul him up herself. "No!" I screamed and ran. I reached the stairs as she was dragging him up the first step. I struck the metal with the crowbar, a clang that echoed. "Let him go." She looked down at me from above. "You're pathetic, a broke old man. You think you can stop this? I have them. They're mine." "You gave birth to them," I spat. "You don't own them." Sirens. First distant, red and blue lights bathed the fuselage. Airport police, state troopers. "Who knew?" Asterisk. Clara smiled cruelly. "It's over, Joe. You just handed me everything." She was right. I violated the order, destroyed property, entered a restricted runway, armed. But as long as that plane didn't take off, I had bought time. Dropped the weapon. A megaphone boomed from behind. I turned. Patrol cars, agents aiming guns at me. I looked at Sam, Leah huddled in a ball, Michael still held by Clara. "I love you," I shouted. "I love you more than anything. Don't forget that." I started to lower the metal to surrender, but the guard who hesitated earlier lunged at me. I reacted by instinct and raised my arm to cover myself. What taser? Someone yelled. I felt the prongs hit my chest. It was like lightning. My entire body seized with white, brutal pain. I fell backward onto the asphalt. The metal rolled away. I heard Sam scream my name. Boots surrounded me. They pinned me to the floor. They cuffed me so tight it bit into the bone. "Stop resisting," they yelled, even though I couldn't even breathe. Through the fog of pain, I saw Clara at the top of the stairs. She wasn't running anymore. She was watching them drag me away like a sack. She smoothed her dress, fixed her hair, and talked to the pilot. I could read her lips. They couldn't leave. The runway was a crime scene and shut down. Rage twisted her face, but she had to usher the children into the plane without taking off. She wasn't leaving that night. I had bought time, trading my freedom for a delay. They shoved me into a patrol car. I managed to see Sil cuffed over the hood of his car. He looked at me and nodded sadly. I passed out before we arrived, I woke up to the beeping of a heart monitor, the smell of disinfectant and wax. I tried to move and saw my wrist cuffed to the rail of a hospital bed, the prison ward. An officer guarded the door. My chest ached where the prongs hit me. When the guard noticed I was awake, he approached without sympathy. "Welcome back. Where are the crows? Doesn't matter. You got bigger problems." The Da added charges. I swallowed. Which ones? Aggravated assault, violation of a protection order, destruction of property, resisting arrest. And because you entered a regulated runway and attacked a plane, they're trying to pin you for terrorism against airport facilities. Federal felony. 20 years minimum. No bail. I stared at the ceiling. Orcery years. I would die locked up. Clara would keep them and the $18 million. My eyes burned. The hole the police didn't see because they were looking for a non-existent dark bilge. There, inside a cedar-smelling box, was a sea-stained envelope. I kept it for 13 years, hoping never to use it. It was the nuclear option. It would destroy Clara, but it would also break my children's hearts. I didn't want them to know who their mother was, but I no longer had a choice. If I wanted to save their future, I had to dynamite their past. I looked at the guard. I need to make a call. One call. Not a lawyer, I said, hardening my voice, with the only man left to finish this. I needed Syl to get out and go into my house one last time. Because that envelope wasn't just a paper. It was. And the time had come to show the world exactly what Clara Green sold 13 years ago. The hours in the ward dragged. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the air changed. The young guard was replaced by one with a thick neck and unblinking eyes. He looked at his watch and left, leaving the door ajar. My instincts screamed. A shadow peeled away from the darkness of the hallway, and a man in surgical scrubs walked in, but his shoulders were too broad. Masked, he moved like a predator. He approached my forestand and pulled out a syringe with clear liquid. "Who sent you?" I rasped. He froze and gave me dead eyes. Go to sleep, old man. It's better this way. Heart failure, real common at your age." He reached for the injection port. I didn't think. I reacted. My left arm was chained. I waited for him to lean in, and I kicked with all my old rage. My heel hit his knee. It made a sickening crunch. He howled and fell. The syringe shattered. "Help!" I roared, rattling the chain. The guy got up, limping, and fled, just as nurses came running. I survived, but I knew something. The war had escalated. Thorne was scared that I had something, and if they tried to kill me here, God help Syl. 5 miles away, under a moonless sky, Syl was fighting his own war. He left a borrowed bicycle in the brush behind my property. The house, surrounded by tape, looked abandoned, but he felt the silence. No crickets, that means predators. He slipped in through a laundry room window with a pocket knife. He walked like a ghost over the floor, navigating the wreckage from the raid. In the hallway, a floorboard creaked. Click, then another and another. 3 lights from the living room. "We have company," a deep voice said. It wasn't police. It was a mercenary. Mr. Thorne said the rat might come back for his cheese. Syl didn't freeze. He dropped a tackle box, hissed where his chest had been, and plunged into the wall. He rolled to a bedroom door. "Grab him and make it look like an accident," the voice ordered. Syl, 65 years old, fueled by alcohol and loyalty versus young professionals. No pistol, they had taken it, just his hands and whatever he could find. He grabbed a heavy ship's lamp with a brass base. He waited. The first man poked his head around the corner, and Syl slammed the lamp into his skull. He dropped without a sound. One down. Syl charged into the hallway and tackled the second man, slamming him against the wall. The other man hit him with a baton on his shoulder. Sil screamed. He headbutted him twice and broke the man's nose in a splatter of blood. The third man, the leader, kicked him in the ribs, sending him flying. A boot pinned him to the floor. "Where is it?" he demanded. We searched the walls, the attic. Where did the old man hide the leverage? Sil, bleeding from his eye, gave a red smile. "You searched the walls, but you didn't check the floor." He twisted the leader's ankle with a dirty bar fight move. The leader fell. Sil crawled to my bedroom, pulled back the rug, lifted the loose board with bloodied fingernails, and pulled out the box. Then the door burst open, and the leader entered with a folding knife. "It's over, old man," he hissed. Sil looked at the window, the jump to the patio. He hugged the box. "Not yet," he murmured, and jumped. The glass exploded like diamonds. He crashed onto shrubs that tore and slowed his fall, rolled onto the concrete with a howl, and saw a shard of glass stuck in his calf. But he had the box. He heard shouts upstairs, a flashlight sweeping the yard. "Get down there and finish him." Sil forced himself up, limping, leaving a trail of blood. He vaulted the fence and fell onto the neighbor's lawn. As the mercenaries came out, he lay still, hugging the box like a relic. They ran past and inches away. Sil waited an hour, barely opened the box to check the envelope, closed it, and didn't go to the hospital. He knew they'd be watching. He walked 5 miles through the brush, bleeding with every step to deliver the cargo. When I saw him the next day in the visitor's room, broken and bruised, I didn't see a drunk. I saw a soldier who had just completed the most important mission of his life. And when I held that blood-stained envelope, I knew that no matter what happened in court, I wasn't alone. The day of the hearing dawned gray and damp. I didn't sleep. I spent the night with the sea-stained envelope taped to my skin under my uniform. It chafed, but that scratch kept me sane. They transported me in a windowless van. The chains on my ankles sounded like funeral bells. When I stepped out, the noise hit me. It wasn't justice, it was a circus. Hundreds of people behind barricades. Reporters screaming my name, looking for a grimace that would sell. Signs from strangers, "Protect the kids. Lock him up, monster." Thorne had turned public opinion into a lynching mob. I walked it in with my head down. The courtroom was freezing, huge, dark wood, designed to make you feel small. The public gallery was full, shoulder, true shoulder. Neighbors I had known for years, avoiding my gaze. Parents of Sam's teammates. And there was Clara at the prosecution's table, but she wasn't the woman in the expensive coat anymore. Now she was the suffering mother, an oversized gray sweater, no makeup, exposed dark circles, hair in a messy bun, a tissue in her hand, a masterpiece of manipulation. Thorne was by her side, sharp as a knife. My public defender, David, was sweating. He whispered that the prosecution was seeking 20 years, that if I showed remorse, they might lower it to 10.10 years, was a death sentence. "No," I told him. "I'm not accepting anything." The judge, Judge Thompson, walked in with a face of stone, looked over his glasses, and in his eyes I was already guilty. The trial was a slaughterhouse. Thorne didn't present a case. He mounted a show. He painted me as a bitter old man who stole children to fill a void. He talked about dark bilges and psychological torture and called his star witness. I expected a police officer. I didn't expect Mr. Patterson, my neighbor, 2 houses down, the same man I helped rebuild his deck after a storm, with whom I shared beers on my porch. He took the stand without looking at me. "Mr. Patterson," Thorne said, walking in front of the jury, "tell us what you heard at the greenhouse over the years." Patterson swallowed hard, looked at Clara, who gave him a small nod, which screams. Lots of screams. At night, I heard the children begging to be let out. I heard Mr. Green hitting them. A shudder ran through the room. I felt a punch to the stomach. It was a lie. In my house, the only screams were for a game on TV or kids playing liar, I whispered. David held my arm to silence me. Thorne smiled. Why didn't you call the police? I was afraid. Everyone was afraid of him. He's violent. He once told me that if anyone messed with his family, he'd bury them. A lie built with silver or threat. The jury swallowed it whole. David told me this was serious. I looked down at the envelope in my uniform and understood that the system wasn't a court. It was a theater. I stood up. You're fired, David, I said. The judge banged his gavel. Mr. Green, you have representation. No, Your Honor, I replied. I represent myself. The room filled with whispers. Thorne chuckled, delighted an old man self-destructing. The judge warned me it was a bad idea, that I didn't know the rules. I held his gaze. I may not know the procedure, but I know the truth, and I'm the only one here who does. After a heavy silence, he accepted. David collected his briefcase with trembling hands, wished me luck, and left. The judge had asked for my first witness. I don't have a witness. Thorne gave a small laugh. The judge, irritated, asked if I had a statement or if we were wasting time. I reached into my uniform, pulled out the sea-stained envelope, crumpled, stained with dirt and Sill's dry blood. I saw Clara's eyes lock onto it. She stopped pretending. Her body stiffened. She recognized the color of her sin. I walked slowly toward the bench, holding the envelope high so the jury could see it. The room fell into silence, the kind of silence that weighs like stone. I tore the seal. The sound of the paper breaking echoed like a gunshot. My hands were steady. I pulled out a handwritten document on yellowed, lined paper, the edges worn, but bearing a notary seal dated August 14th, 2011. I cleared my throat and read in a clear, cold voice that reached every corner of the room. I, Clara Green, hereby totally and permanently sell my parental rights and authority over my children, Sam, Leah, and Michael, to Josiah Green. This transfer is final and absolute. In exchange for relinquishing all claim to motherhood and promising never to contact them or Josiah Green again, I accept the sum of $25,000 in cash. This money is for the purchase of a 2011 Mazda Miata. I held up the sheet. $25,000. The price of 3 lives. The room exploded in a collective gasp. The court reporter stopped typing, her mouth open. The bailiff took a step back, disgusted, but I wasn't finished. I pulled out a photograph taped to the back of the paper. I showed it to the jury and the judge, Clara, in a dealership parking lot, leaning against a red Mazda Miata convertible, smiling like a predator, in one hand the keys, in the other a fan of cash, and behind her, unfocused but clear on the hot concrete, Michael's infant carrier. He was 2 months old, red-faced from crying, abandoned while his mother posed with money. I placed the letter and the photo in front of Judge Thompson. I saw the color drain from his face. He picked up the sheet and his hand trembled. He read it once, then again. He looked at the photo. His professional composure evaporated, and the human fury of someone looking at a monster emerged. Thorne, the invincible lawyer, was petrified. His face turned ashen. He looked at the document, then at his client, and stepped away from her, as if the rot were contagious. He closed his folder, put down his pen. There were no pretty tears, no performance. She sought allies in the room, and found none. The jury looked at her with hatred, the public with horror. The judge breathed hard, trying to contain himself, and when he spoke, his voice was low, dangerous. Ms. Green, in 20 years, on this bench, I thought I had seen everything. But this, you sold your children. You didn't give them up for adoption. You didn't ask for help. You sold them for a car. He held up the photo. And you left your baby on the pavement in the middle of summer to pose for a picture with cash. That's not real, she shrieked. It's fake. He invented it. The judge banged the gavel like thunder. The notary seal is authentic. The handwriting matches everything else you've signed this month. Do not insult my intelligence. Clara collapsed, weeping, ugly, but Thorne still tried to save the ship. He stood up, his voice theatrical, claiming the document was irregular, demanding a forensic examination, claiming I had 13 years to forge it. The judge was about to reply when the doors at the back burst open. The courtroom jumped. I turned, my chains rattling. It was Sam. He arrived, sweaty, his shirt torn, one shoe missing, his eyes burning with a fire I recognized. Clara shrieked his name as an order. Sam ignored her and walked down the center aisle. The bailiff tried to stop him, but I roared, "Let him pass. He's my grandson." The judge raised a hand. "Let the boy speak." Sam reached my side, taller than me. He squeezed my shoulder. "Sorry, I'm late, Grandpa. I had to climb out the hotel bathroom window. The guard was fast, but I was faster." Then he looked at the judge. "Everything my grandfather said is true. She's lying. She doesn't want us. She wants the money," Thorne protested. "Minor, under duress. Brainwashing." Sam reached into his pocket and pulled out a cheap black flip phone. She had found a decoy. "I'm not brainwashed," he said, holding it up as proof, "and I have evidence." He opened it, pressed a button, and held the speaker up to the microphone. It was static-filled, but the voice was unmistakable. Clara's no tears, no sweetness, pure harshness. "So when do I get the money?" she demanded. A man's voice replied, "As soon as we sign the guardianship papers on Tuesday, Clara." "Good, because I can't stand another day with these brats. The oldest one looks at me like he wants to kill me, and the little one won't stop complaining." "It's pathetic." The man asked about the trust. "The trust is worth $18 million. Keep your eyes on the prize, I know. As soon as the check clears, I'm buying them 3 tickets to that Swiss boarding school, the cheapest one, but far away." "Let them rot there." Man asked about me, and Clara laughed, dry and chilling. "Don't worry. Thorne says he's getting 20 years. He's old. He'll die inside. I'll be toasting in Paris while his grandkids rot in the Alps. He's a foolish old idiot who should have died years ago." Sam turned off the recording. The silence was absolute, heavier than anything before. The jury was horrified. The judge was no longer surprised. He was enraged. Clara, finally unmasked, let out an animalistic shriek and lunged. Not at me, but at Sam, her nails seeking his face. "Give it to me. It belongs to me," she screamed. Sam backed away, holding the phone out of her reach. "Bailiff." "Now," the judge thundered. 3 agents tackled her and cuffed her. She kicked, bit, spat, and screamed obscenities. "I'm the mother. They're mine." Thorne saw the disaster and tried to escape. He closed his briefcase, gathered his papers, and took steps toward the exit. "Mr. Thorne," the judge said in a calm voice that was terrifying. The lawyer froze. "You presented a witness you knew was lying. You facilitated a fraud. You were complicit in a conspiracy to take a man's freedom and family for money." He looked at the agents. "Take Ms. Green away. Charges of perjury, fraud, abandonment, battery, and conspiracy." Clara turned toward me, pure hate on her face. I hate you. I hope you die. And for the first time in 13 years, I didn't feel anger, only pity. I know, I said softly, and that's why you lost. The judge also ordered Thorne's immediate detention, investigation recommendation for disbarment, and criminal charges. They took him away, his expensive shoes dragging. The courtroom was chaos, reporters yelling, but in the middle of everything, there was an impossible calm. Sam looked at my chains. We won, Grandpa, he asked, his voice trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. I saw the judge signal for them to remove my shackles. I saw the empty space where the monsters had been. Yes, son, I replied. Guess we won. The judge banged the gavel one last time. Case dismissed definitively. Mr. Green, you are free. And as for the custody of the minors, I believe they are exactly where they ought to be. I walked out of the courthouse not as an accused man, but as a grandfather. Sam was at my side, and the most important part was still missing, getting Leah and Michael back. We went straight to the hotel. The guards tried to stop us, but this time I wasn't carrying a crowbar. I was carrying a court order signed by a federal judge. As soon as they saw it, they stood aside. The following months were a whirlwind of paperwork. The money, $18.5 million, seemed untold, a phantom figure. It was theirs. It came from an unknown father and a mother who sold them. I went to the firm that administered the trust, the same one that had been ready to help Clara loot it. I walked in wearing my best flannel shirt and work boots. They looked down their noses at me until I put the guardianship papers on the table. I fired all of them, the administrators, the lawyers, the accountants who looked the other way. I transferred the trust to a conservative firm with an ironclad ethical code and armored it so that not even I could touch the principal. That money was for college, first homes. The future, I did collect the administration fee the court authorized. Yes, but not for luxuries to repair what was broken. 6 months later, I stood at the entrance of my old house. A for sale sign swung in the wind. It hurt to say goodbye. I raised my daughter there, and then her children. There was laughter, tears, and also the broken door, the police tape, the ghosts. It was time to let go. I sold it to a young couple just starting out. I took what was left, and a portion of the fee, and bought a dream I'd had since I was 20, a big motorhome. One of those luxury RVs with real beds, a full kitchen, and space for all of us to live together without being cramped. We pulled out on a Tuesday morning. We didn't look back. We drove west, watching fishing ports turn into hills and then into red desert. We sang along to the radio, ate at roadside diners, and laughed until our stomachs hurt for the first time in 13 years. There was no shadow waiting on the road. Now I'm sitting in a folding chair on the edge of the Pacific coast. The sun is setting, painting the sky with impossible oranges and purples. The air smells of salt. A campfire crackles in front of me. Sam is teaching Michael how to roast a marshmallow without setting it on fire, even though Michael insists on turning his into charcoal. Leah is reading, wrapped in a blanket, her feet resting on a log, at peace in a way I hadn't seen since she was little Dot, and when I look at them, I don't see $18 million. I don't see trust funds or lawsuits. I see my children. Clara believed she could buy happiness, that a mansion and a private jet would fill the hole inside her. She thought selling her children for $25,000 was a good deal because it bought her a convertible. She was wrong. They say blood is thicker than water, and they use that to justify sins, to force you to forgive the person who destroys you just because they share your DNA. I learned the hard way that blood is biology. Nothing more. Love is a choice. Loyalty is an act. Clara chose the money. I chose them. And as I watch Michael laugh when his marshmallow ignites and Sam claps him on the back while Leah smiles at them, I know I chose well. She sold these moments for the price of a used car. The money may be sitting in a bank, but it's not worth a single one of their hugs, because family isn't who gives birth to you. Family is who stays, who sells their boat to pay your debts, who smashes through a fence to stop a jet, who sits by your side in a courtroom when the whole world hates you. Family is who is there when the storm hits, and who is still there when the sun comes out. And looking at my 3 children by the fire, I know one thing for sure: we are home. Wherever we park this RV, we are home. And that is a wealth Clara will never understand. I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen, so you can choose what to watch next.